welcome to another video, Purple Political Talk here, and today we're going to be looking at the 2020 presidential election and an updated 2020 election prediction. So, recently the biggest thing that has happened and shaken up the election is the announcement of Kamala Harris becoming Joe Biden's VP. We're going to discuss that in this prediction as well and factor all these different events that are changing the election, whether it be increasing COVID cases, the economy, that are shifting in a lot of places, and what is it doing to the presidential election. So before you get started, please remember to like, subscribe, and turn on post notifications to get notified when I post my next video. So let's get started. So looking at this map, it has all our safe states filled in. So we're going to start with our likely states at this time for the Democratic Party. With Kamala Harris on their ticket, that just gives the Democrats a lot more excitement, especially in a lot of these likely states, which actually might be on the verge of going into the safe column. We saw yesterday that the Democratic Party had a fundraising record with Kamala Harris on the ticket, and that day they announced it. They fundraised a lot of money, so that shows that she does bring that excitement to the ticket and impulses people to vote. So that's one of the initial thoughts that I have with this. And looking at this map, generally speaking, where we're going to see a lot of change might be the Sun Belt. And especially since Harris at this point brings a lot of excitement to that area of the country. However, I think our initial map at this point where we're going to start off of is 232 electoral votes for the Democrats out of their likely margins and safe margins. So what states have we put in this column? First, the state of Nevada. So this is somewhat of a western state, especially ideologically, demographically, and things like that. Kamala Harris is from next door, and I would say these two have somewhat similar demographics, at least when it comes to having a lot of Latinos. And Kamala Harris appeals to minorities. She does appeal to kind of all minorities. She's not one of the candidates that would appeal to just one. She appeals to all of them. So I think at this point, Nevada, I think it was going pretty likely for Biden. It looked pretty solid. However, this might just be a little bit more and more assurance for the Biden campaign. At this point, I thought maybe before they announced it was Harris, maybe 5 points. Now I'm looking at it and maybe going by 7 or 8, which is somewhat of a substantial gain when it comes to just a couple of days. Next is the state of Colorado, and I would say similar here. It's also a big thing that we must consider that Harris has Latino support. That's one of the areas where I say Biden really struggles at when it comes to Latinos. Harris, is she the best at Latinos? No. However, she does have an improvement and adds on to Biden's ticket. And as well, Harris's tough on crime history. I don't know if the Democrats are really going to market her as a very tough on crime person. But if the Republicans end up doing that, essentially what might happen is that these suburban voters might come a little bit more out for Biden if they're not already. That race could go anywhere from maybe before 5 to 7 points. I would see now going from 7 to 10 points. And with Harris on the ticket, the excitement is just there. And every day it grows more and more and more. However, with having someone else attached to the ticket, to the campaign, gives a lot more room for error and a big scandal to break, so we do not know. And that's really a big thing to consider. When it comes to VP, they could really help you or hurt you. They could help you, for example, in this case, I think initially Biden Harris, that really helped out Biden with fundraising, but it could hurt you Sarah Palin hurt McCain. So it's just really a thing that needs to be balanced. Don't take any of this for granted, because again, things can definitely change. Going on to the state of Minnesota, we have this state is more and more consistently Democratic, and for a big part of the state, it's mostly going to turn Democratic due to Black Lives Matter, George Floyd, everything being there. I don't really know if they should market it like that, but however, since all the different events that haven't happened here, essentially, I think COVID-19 hasn't been as big of an issue here, although it has had some cases there. Overall, I would say that, the Democrats have been leading here by likely margins, at least 7 to 10%. With Harris on the ticket, I don't see anything major changing. But that means that they just get a little bit more assurance that they're going to stay in that likely margin. Overall, I mean, now that we're talking about Minnesota, I think Harris is not the best candidate for the Midwest that he could have chosen. However, I mean, she has good improvements because there's certain demographics in the Midwest. Okay, going on to the state of Virginia. And this state is interesting for the fact that it's pretty much mostly suburban because you have a lot of Washington, D.C. suburbs, as well as the Richmond suburbs and the Virginia Beach suburbs, amongst other smaller rural towns that might be on the western end of the state. I mean, at this point, Joe Biden was doing pretty good here. And if anything, Harris is going to help. Harris, I mean, she does appeal to somewhat of the minority vote, but I think also Harris does a very good job at appealing somewhat to the suburbs. A lot of people don't like her, however, I mean, she has that appeal. And I mean, in Virginia, a state that mostly is relied on suburbs to see who is going to win, really does help the Biden ticket to have Harris there. And if anything, I mean, it's a stronger ticket, I would say, than Biden could have if he could have picked someone else. Going on to the state of New Hampshire, I mean, this is a state where I actually could see Biden kind of doing a little bit worse here, just because Harris is on the ticket. And, I mean, the state of New Hampshire, I think, could end up narrowing down, considering that Trump got pretty close in 2016. Again, this is not going to be like 2016. However, we know that there's somewhat of a Trump base there. I mean, Trump is if you think about it, he's technically a more of the, like a moderate in the GOP party. Is he moderate in most issues? No. However, I mean, when it comes between the gap in the GOP party from the kind of super right-wing people and the moderates, Donald Trump falls right in the middle. So, maybe since they kind of like somewhat a little bit more moderate Republicans, I think the state could end up narrowing down. But I mean, and that's only because Harris doesn't add anything to it. So, it could just stay the same. It could narrow down for Trump, if anything. However, I mean, at this point, I think Biden is going to probably win there by a hefty margin of probably like 7 to 8 points, which is pretty good again, but Kamala Harris doesn't really affect anything in the state of New Hampshire. So, those are all the Democratic likely states, and let's go on to the Republican likely states. I mean, at this point in time, Kamala Harris, she doesn't affect too many states when it comes to the Republican, and bringing them more to the Republican column, or to the Democratic column, or maybe skewing it a little bit more left. However, I mean, the one place where I think she will have an impact will be the South, and if you could include Missouri in there as well. I mean, again, things are changing pretty constantly. However, I mean, Kamala Harris does have the African-American appeal. First off, you have the state of Alaska. I mean, this state is a state that usually is pretty, it's odd when it comes to politics. I mean, they do not like Trump, but they do not, like, love the Democrats. So, I mean, at this point, is Biden going to win here? Probably not. And I mean, Harris doesn't probably help because she's not the type of people the Alaskans like. However, I mean, I honestly could see Trump easily winning here. However, the margin will probably come down, probably the same where it was before Harris was officially announced to be the VP. I could honestly see Alaska going by anywhere around maybe like 10 points, I would say, is like a good margin for Alaska. Going on to the state of Montana, again, another state where I think Harris won't do any big effects. And here's the thing with Montana. Trump is kind of popular. I mean, if anything, he's very popular in the state of Montana compared to other states at least. But, I mean, they're very moderated. Some people say that Donald Trump's leadership during the pandemic has been a little spotty. Which, I mean, I don't blame them because truly the pandemic, like, response has been somewhat spotty for the Trump campaign. However, I mean, you still have a lot of the solid Republican voters who really like Trump. So, this state's probably going to narrow down somewhat from where it was in 2016. However, would it be the most crucial, the closest battleground state? No. And, I mean, Kamala Harris doesn't really help that because, I mean, she's a very kind of odd politician, I would say, just because of her ideological views. She leans left, but then she also has very conservative roots in some places, so it's really hard to like see where is she going to act, because she acts with her different political views when it comes to different timings. So maybe for the election, if she could have the conservative ideals kind of pop up a little more, then states like Montana might be a little bit more in play. Going on to the state of Missouri, you just have a lot of African-American population here that really, if they come out to vote, they're going to make the state somewhat contested, maybe in the likely margin. So, I mean, especially in St. Louis, where there is a big movement right now for African-American voters, and putting Harris on the ticket is going to impact a somewhat large amount of votes here. Will it be enough to flip the state? Probably not. However, narrowing down the margin also shows us that some of these states do have a possibility of flipping in the future, as well as possibly, becoming more and more contested. The next state is the state of Mississippi. Again, it's no question that this state is somewhat more on the Republican side. However, there is one big Democratic area, in this case, the western end of the state, where there are actually a lot of Democrats, and that's kind of the black belt of Mississippi, which tends to vote Democratic. Kamala Harris on the ticket is going to excite African American voters, especially African American women, who are the most reliable voters for Democrats at this point in time. And honestly, that's going to be very good for the Biden and Harris campaign, as long as they can get out the voters out and they can get the bases excited. They should be able to win those areas of Mississippi and essentially move it further to the left. However, Donald Trump still does have his very big, Republican conservative base that's essentially always been there. The last of the likely Republican states is the state of South Carolina. And now with Harris on the ticket, probably going to become more and more likely for the Republican Party instead of being very solid and safe. With just going off of the couple things that, well, first of all, Jim Clyburn is the biggest political figure, at least when it comes to South Carolina. And Harris is a big figure with his base, as well as Biden. So you have a lot of the black vote in South Carolina that might actually be going to Biden. And at this point in time, we can see that support for Biden might be increased due to Harris being on ticket, especially amongst African Americans. And if anything, Harris will definitely help Biden, at least when it comes to the state of South Carolina. And generally speaking, we're going to see one big theme. Where does Harris perform well for the ticket? Where does she improve? The Sun Belt. That's her strong suit. And we're going to see that as we fill in more of the map. So let's go on to our lean Democratic states and talk about some of the states that are right now going by a lean margin. So right now we have states like Wisconsin, Michigan, Pennsylvania, Arizona. I would say at this point Florida, states like North Carolina. These states are now falling more into the lean Democratic column, especially now that Kamala Harris is on the ticket. She's hopping, especially in the southern Sun Belt. So let's get started by talking about the Midwest. Here's the thing with the Midwest. Will Harris help the ticket here? I do not personally think so. And considering that Joe Biden was doing pretty well, but again, as we get closer to Election Day, Trump actually starting to campaign heavily, all these different things, the Midwest, I think, right now falls in the lean column, probably going by the higher lean column for the Democrats at this point, 3 to 5%. And I honestly am seeing here that Joe Biden might end up focusing more on the Sun Belt than the Midwest, just because he can. Again, because he can doesn't mean that he should. So, that's a big thing to consider. And I think, honestly, the Biden campaign, looking at the vice presidential pick, looking at a lot of these different things, where are they going to focus? It's going to be the Sun Belt. And generally, in Wisconsin, Michigan, Pennsylvania, these states have been somewhat narrowing down from where they were maybe a couple months ago when we first started getting polling Biden versus Trump. And in Michigan, we have some latest polls that are having just Biden ahead by 4. So, is the Rust Belt super solid for the Democrats? I wouldn't say super consolidated, super solid. However, it is one of the bigger margins at this point for the Biden campaign. And, I honestly see them winning there by 3 to 5 points. Now, going on to the Sun Belt. So, the state of Arizona is another state I would say Kamala Harris will definitely help out Joe Biden, and especially when it comes to this prediction. So why do I see this helping Biden here? She's essentially from the Southwest, so Kamala Harris is actually more from the Bay Area. However, she has kind of the California appeal that appeals to all voters in that general area of the country, that being this general area. So, at this point in time, I honestly see Kamala Harris really helping out Joe Biden in Arizona. And, it also depends. I think the Biden campaign, what they will do is market Harris as the somewhat more conservative Democrat in some states and the more liberal in others. And I think at this point, in the state of Arizona, Harris's record with policing and all that stuff Is it going to do great? Maybe not with progressive, but with the moderate voters in the state of in Arizona, that might really help. And since she has a lot of Sunbelt minority appeal, another big plus for the Biden ticket. I would have seen Biden leading here by 2 to 3 points, but now I see it going up a little bit more in the lean margin, 3 to 5 points. So pretty good difference. Going on to the last two states in the lean column for the Democratic Party at this point, Florida and North Carolina. With Harris on the ticket, I mean, this just kind of grants the Democratic Party a little bit more a safety net, at least when it comes to Florida and North Carolina. In the state of Florida, Biden wasn't overly popular, and I'm going to guess that Harris is not going to be overly popular either. However, I mean, what's going to help us the Biden campaign here? They're going to be able to consolidate the southern vote up in the upper panhandle that has a lot of African American vote, as well as some of the minorities. Since Kamala Harris has better appeal to minorities than Biden does, I mean, at this point, Kamala Harris will really help the ticket there, where I could have seen Biden winning by around 1 to 2 points. Maybe with Harris on the ticket, 2 to 3 points is where I'm looking at this time. Out of the state of North Carolina, I would see a similar thing. You would get a lot of the black southern vote excited to vote for Biden, and kind of having Harris on the ticket really helps when it comes to appealing and making them want to vote. So, I mean, at this point, where this state could have easily been, I would say anywhere from a little bit less than 1% to Biden to like 1.5%. Right now, I think I could see it like going around 2%. If the elections were held today, which, I mean, is pretty good for the Democratic Party. They're able to get this turnout. They're able to get excitement in the Sun Belt, essentially North Carolina, Florida, and Arizona. So those are all our Democratic lean states. Let's go into our Republican lean states at this time. And I mean, the Republican Party is going to have to fight a lot more when it comes to this election. It's going to be interesting to watch. I feel like right now, there's only 3 lean states / districts. Them being made second, Nebraska second, and the state of Texas. So a lot of people would say that Texas is now in the tilt column because Harris is the VP pick. However, I would say it's actually more solidly in the lean column. Probably right now, ballpark going by 1 to 3%. It's probably going to narrow down with Harris on the ticket. I mean, Kamala Harris is someone that appeals to the Sun Belt. She's going to appeal to these immigrant Latino voters. She's going to appeal to some of these Indian voters. There's somewhat of a large base of Indian voters in the state of Texas, and I honestly feel like this state is growing somewhat more Democratic, and with Kamala Harris' Sunbelt appeal, that's really going to help. And is it going to be able to flip it completely in a regular scenario? Probably not. I'll still see it going, like I said, by 1 to 3%. However, it certainly would help the Biden campaign. Going on to the 2 districts, I mean, these districts are somewhat conservative. And I mean, the Biden-Harris ticket does somewhat be affected. However, I don't see it be affected by too much. So, I mean, at this point in time, those 2 districts, like I just said, they're conservative. They kind of like Trump. However, we still don't know. We don't have too much polling data from here. However, recent polls, I think, had Biden ahead. However, I think that Donald Trump might be able to narrowly edge it out in those 2 congressional districts. So, those essentially all are lean states for both the Democrats and the Republicans. Let's go on to the tilt states and kind of the deciding factor if this is going to be a landslide or just a over 300 victory. So, I would say at this point in time, choosing Harris was a smart pick for a couple states. That heavily helps Biden in Ohio and kind of moves it a little bit more solidly into his column. That helps him with the state of Iowa. Think maybe narrowly winning there. And the state of Georgia, I would say, will become a huge toss-up right now. It's going to be hard to tell who's going to win here. I'm going to edge Trump victory in Georgia narrowly. However, Harris would definitely help Biden. So, by landslide means 357 electoral votes for some people considered landslide. So, in this case right now, I think that Biden and Harris are winning the election by a landslide. As I think right now, they might be standing in a point where they might be leading in Ohio and Iowa. And here's why. Honestly, Kamala Harris helps with the African American population, and there is the areas where there's a lot of African Americans in the Midwest. Essentially, a lot of in like northern Ohio, and I think it's southern Iowa. So those areas of these states are going to come out heavily for Biden and Harris has appealed to those voters. So that essentially is going to be a very good thing for Biden and his team. So, I mean, honestly, it could be contested because, again, Trump has a large base in these 2 states. He won here by 5%. However, I mean, considering that that Biden brings the Biden-Obama essentially kind of all that enthusiasm with him, again, somewhat good for him. So I mean, at this point, Biden, is he like the most? Is he going to have the biggest electoral college victory? I mean, not the biggest, but certainly big. And I mean, with Ohio and Iowa, those states are really going to depend on situation. But just going off of basic excitement for Harris on the ticket immediately, like right after, since the announcement was just yesterday, I mean, there is not much we can say about that right now. So those are the two Democratic states, and then we have the state of Georgia, which I think at this point tilts a little bit more to the Trump column. I think honestly, Kamala Harris will certainly help Biden here. However, with voter suppression by Governor Brian Kemp, not going to be super easy for the Democrats to win here. However, I think it's definitely possible, and I think that the state of Georgia might go flip-floppy from here to election day, so we'll see. So overall, this is our electoral map at this time for the 2020 presidential election between the Trump-Pence ticket against the Biden-Harris ticket. And I guess this video is a little bit more based on Harris and what she would do, because this is our first prediction where she's on the ticket, and we talked about all these states. So I mean, at this point in time, we're gonna have an interesting road to come. The conventions are starting next week. We have the Democratic National Convention next week. I would definitely cover that if anything big arises from that. And there is the Republican National Convention coming up now in 2 weeks from now. Another very big, exciting event. And other than that, that's pretty much it for this prediction. So guys, I hope you enjoyed the video. If so, please give it a huge thumbs up, like, subscribe, and turn on post notifications to get notified when I post my next video. Goodbye.